local supermarket, one day, right, they had this Asian section. I started seeing Kongguan biscuits. You know Kongguan biscuits, like growing up?
I think some of the challenges that I hear from people is the loneliness when they first arrive there.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they are completely isolated, right? And especially if culturally they're very different.
It's like, 9th of August. Is there any live stream of the National Day per day? Or like you make an effort to, let me
I mean, if someone came to you and asked you for advice, right, as someone in their midlife, they decide that they want to move, maybe not necessarily to America, but move somewhere out of their comfort zone, right? Move out of Singapore. And I'm asking this question more in like from a typical Singaporean mindset, right?
Yeah.
Not just anybody who wants to move country, right? Because I think someone else growing up in Malaysia and move to another country, for them is a totally different ball game, and how they see the world is quite different. But as a Singaporean, uniquely Singaporean, what advice would you give them as someone in their midlife who decide that they're going to uproot, live somewhere else? What is the most important thing that they should know before they take that step?
I would say let's tackle like the very realistic things, right? One would be, again, like financially, are you set up for that? Do you have a way to fund yourself? And where you're going, your destination, is it of a higher cost of living, lower cost of living? What is your projected cost of living? All these very real things you need to know, right? Able to minimally have a place to stay. So are you moving by yourself, or are you like moving with your spouse or your partner or whatever? And then like obviously, then you need to kind of work that out. So those basic stuff, I think, let's just put it this way, like the roof over your head, food on the
Medical
table.
insurance.
Medical, yes. Do you have medical issues? Do you need long-term medication? Things like this. All these very realistic things you have to think about. Even things like family history. At that point in time, you may be healthy, but kind of like, what's your family history? Is it like very common for your family to have a certain tendency for certain like illnesses or something like that? You have to get prepared. Like, in that country, are they good in that area and things like that? And then the other thing would be, I would say, if time and resources permit, to actually spend significant time in that country of choice before you make that eventual move.
Yeah.
And not just like 3 days or even like a week, but really like, if you can, a month, or depending on the visa thing, like 3 months, take a sabbatical, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Live as real alive as possible. When I used to work in fashion, then I would get to travel. And the first trip was the first time I went to UK, to London. I was very excited because I've always wanted to go to London, and then I went. And prior to that, I've always traveled only to the US for work. So I went to London, and then I came back, and then I told my boss. And then I said, like, London, language, everything is so similar. Like, toilet is toilet, it's not restroom. It just feels more like natural, right? And I said, yeah, it's so nice, everything's walkable, it's very much like Singapore, blah, 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 blah. Then I said, yeah, I think I can see myself living there. And I remember she gave me this, not in a wet blanket way, but in a very like, okay, let me temper the thing a little bit. And she says, spending time in another country as a tourist, right, is very different, because you have very real things like medical, and if possible, if you know somebody who's already doing something like that, ask them. That's the best way.
Yeah.
The heart of charity. Subscribe to our podcast, Empowered at Midlife. For me, I'm just starting out. Shamala has been doing this for a while, but as a fledgling podcaster, I would really appreciate people who would listen, watch, and give us your comments. Even if you don't like it, even if you don't agree, we can have a conversation on that too. Yeah, and who knows, you could be part of our podcast later. But you must subscribe. Thank you.
Somebody who has left, especially as a Singaporean, right, who's done, and I don't mean this in a bragging way, but I have pride in my career, and I did really well, and to then leave at that sort of peak, to
Yeah.
just say, okay, you know what, I feel what I want to do, my heart, it's telling me. And then where it paid off and where I wouldn't say it didn't pay off, but it's like, where are the parts that it paid off, and then where are the parts that are the realities.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I wanted to say, are you familiar with like Chinese popular culture in Singapore or entertainment circle? Sharon Au.
I've heard of a name. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's interesting, but after I moved, I've always known of her, and we've got common friends, but we are not friends. So I know of her, but she doesn't know of me, lah. And I realized, okay, so back then I realized we were of the same age, and then I realized we had a very similar trajectory. That we both left because we are the same age, and we both left Singapore at the same time, for different reasons, or at least what I understand from her interviews.
So, okay, I didn't know she left Singapore.
Yeah, and then I've always listened to some of the interviews and felt this parallels, like, yes, I totally know what you mean, That, like when she said the thing, I was like, yes, yeah, that's how I feel.
What are the things?
I think just one of those things of like, was it the right decision? Any regrets? Things like that. Quite existential. So
Yeah.
existential questions / maybe crisis, depending on how you want to look at it, versus real questions. Then when do you want to go back? Do you even go back? Things like that.
How long have you been away?
Maybe 9 years.
Okay. That's quite long, yeah? 9
Yeah,
years.
that's quite long. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel the 9 years has just gone by very quickly?
I think it feels both. This is a bit of like a cop-out kind of answer, but it feels both long and short at the same time.
Okay.
You remember the periods where you have maybe struggles, or you're kept up late at night, mulling over things, or ruminating over things and all that, or worrying over things, and it could be just periods of time, like months at a stretch, right? And then the memories of that is like, whoa, that really felt very long. But then when you kind of look back, it's like, wow, 9 years just went by like that.
Okay. So then, question back at you when you were talking about Sharon now. Any regrets?
No. There are moments where you would ask yourself that question. When it's tough, you're here alone. I mean, sure, I have my partner, but just saying, when you really think about your support network, right? I feel like we all need different, need more than one support network. And leaving as an older adult means that all your established friendships that are like, years long friendships and all that are all formed in Singapore. And here, yes, you do form friendships, but they're all very new, and you don't really have that much common history, right? So the question of regrets, when you're going through a tough time, that's when that question always comes like, you will ask yourself, like, oh, so if you had to do this again, will you do it? Like, do you regret the decision? And I'm happy to say I've never regretted my decision.
Okay.
No matter how tough it was, I've always felt, and with time, I've gained even more confidence to say that if I didn't do it, I would regret it.
Yeah. It was a shot, right, that needed to be taken just to see for yourself, right? Yeah.
Just to take that journey, take that step, see for yourself, and you take the good with the bad. And also, I feel like one thing, if anybody who's like listening, watching, in a similar situation, older adult thinking of leaving, right, or maybe even taking a whole different step, especially without the comfort of being a salaried employee, the comfort of work, or steady regular income. Making the decision, I would say it's tempting sometimes to think, to daydream a little bit and go, if I didn't leave, wow, where would I be right now, right? And that always comes with, I feel for me, in the context of money, financial security and all this, it's always this, where would I be now and all that, right? And I would always tell myself, sometimes I indulge just for the fun of it, but I always tell myself, separate from what could have been. Merely extrapolating that this was where I was, and I just extrapolate, right? Things don't change. And basically things either stay the same or keep getting better.
Yeah. At the moment, you're self-employed. You're doing like your own thing. So was that
Yeah, go ahead.
Was there a thought to go into full-time employment, like even when you were there?
That was definitely the first goal.
Mm.
So when I moved, I knew that okay, it's gonna take a while. There'll be a job search, blah blah blah, and then you do, and I'm quite proud of myself for being sensible like that. To actually build up, at least a buffer, right? Like cash buffer, savings buffer, because like okay, it will take time. So in that
Yeah.
process, you do need to fund yourself, and it took longer than I had expected, than I had built up, right? But I didn't wait till sort of that buffer is nearing the end to start thinking of alternatives. And even then, it was like, okay, what can I do freelance? How do I go about doing it? So there was a lot of figuring that out as well. At this point in time, so things changed about like 4 years ago when I found a permanent part-time engagement marketing agency, and then that changed things. It felt, once you have that stable regular income, it just feels better. Yeah, and then as of
Okay.
last year, I started teaching as well. So that's another, and that's so adjunct. So that's another, and less reliance on the freelance work.
Okay. Do you think it was the economy, the way it was, or was it because of your industry? I mean, if you could see or if you could share, what is the challenge that maybe prevented you from finding a full-time employment?
It would be industry and age. And by age, maybe I shouldn't say age, nature of my experience, or where I had most of my working experience, right? So then there's all these things that sort of like, okay, you're older, you're more senior, most of your experience is from another country. And on top of that, I come from a fashion and beauty background, right? Which, if you look at California itself in terms of location, you would naturally think, oh, it's more like LA, San Francisco. Maybe San Francisco is more like tech or something, but LA will be more like lifestyle, fashion, beauty, things like that. Yeah, but I'm in San Diego. So then all of these things kind of work against me. Although I did work with global brands, especially the longest part of my career was with American brands like Gap
Okay.
and Republic. Like that helped, but kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so would you? I think some of the challenges that I hear from people is the loneliness when they first arrive there,
Yeah.
because they feel like they are completely isolated, right? And especially if culturally they're very different from the local people there, that feels much more alienating, you literally feel like you're all alone. And
Yes.
so what advice would you give?
I think technology helped a lot. I can't imagine doing this maybe like 20, 30 years ago. How even lonelier that would feel. You're having to do international calling, which is like so expensive. There's none of this like Zoom or WhatsApp or anything. So I think technology has helped a lot, but obviously make sure you're set up for that. And then my recommendation is wherever you're moving to, see if there are any Singaporean food places. It sounds very frivolous, right? But if there are,
Yeah.
or if there's a Singaporean, I don't know, like related business, just find those, right? I think minimally you will feel, oh, okay, I'm not that alone. There's another Singaporean, be it personal or thing. Yeah. And in the absence of that, which actually San Diego doesn't have any Singaporean,
Yeah.
seeing if you have friends or friends of friends.
Yeah. I totally get what you mean. I mean, I've not lived elsewhere, but I used to backpack. I travel, and when I travel, I go for it's like 2 months kind of thing, right? And when you go to places like, and this is back then, like 30 years ago, right? When you go to places like Europe, you would every day is just the food. After a while, it's like, oh my god, I can't take this anymore. So when I got to Amsterdam, I know that there were more Asian food, and I just kept looking, and I found Indonesian nasi goreng, right? So it's like, okay, this is so much closer to home. So like, chicken nasi goreng, and that just made me feel so much more at home. I felt much more comfortable. I think food makes such a big difference, you know. And it makes you feel like, okay, you know, I'm back to myself, almost like that, you know. And
Yeah.
especially when you're traveling, you can't cook for yourself, so that's a bit harder.
Start specific Singapore food. If there's no Singapore food, widen it a little bit Southeast Asian food,
Yeah.
Thai food, whatever.
Yes,
And then
yes.
if still don't have, widen it a bit Japanese food, Korean food.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah.
That definition of comfort food has just taken on more deeper meaning or more
Yeah.
nuances when I moved. Because comfort food is really in that moment, you're like, okay, this in that moment you are there wherever
Yes.
you are in Singapore. Like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it could be
Yeah.
it doesn't even need to be restaurant food.
Mm,
Like I can give a very frivolous example, but over time I found some, and I remember the first one I found was the instant laksa by Prima Deli,
mm.
which was damn expensive, but still I bought it. I remember my local supermarket. One day, right, they had this Asian section. I started seeing Kongguan biscuits. You know, Kongguan biscuits, like growing up as kids, is one of those like in the big tins, and I never usually care very much for it.
Yeah.
And then in working life, it's always in the pantry. Right? That's a standard. The company HR will always be like, there's always Kongguan biscuits, right? Again, kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
unless I'm very hungry and there's nothing. But I saw it and I was like, oh my god, Kongguan biscuit. So since then, I have been religiously buying the Kongguan biscuit from them, and a specific flavor that I used to like as a kid. It's the lemon puff,
Okay, yes, I know
which
which
is very
one.
obscure, right? But yet they sell it, that flavor there. I would have thought they would have sold some chocolate one or whatever, right? But yeah, and then sometimes in the comfort of my own home, I feel like it, I'll just go, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna make a hot cup of Milo and I'm just gonna eat some of the lemon puff biscuits.
Yeah.
And simple as that, in that moment, you know, if you don't look outside, right, you just feel you're transported back.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I think food is so powerful. You know, there's a lot of memories tagged to food, right? Because food is also, I mean, our stomach is really for digesting food, digesting emotions as well. So that's why it's so
Yeah.
closely linked. It's pretty amazing. So So, one question I have for you, do you remember your first friend that you made, you know, when you moved? This friend is not necessarily someone who introduced you, but a friend you made on your own, not necessarily someone who introduced you or.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. My first instinct is to say most of my friends here are introduced. I think maybe my colleagues.
Mm.
My
I think
colleagues,
this
yeah.
just goes to show how important network is.
Yes. Oh my god,
Yeah,
yes.
it's so important because we really cannot exist just on our own. Like, let's say we decide to uproot, right, and go somewhere else. It's really very hard to make it out like solo. You actually do need help from other people, like
Yes.
friend or somebody's connection, right? And that could be a kickstarter. You may not be friends forever with these people, right? But then it kickstarts your journey and then
Yes.
it expands. I think the
Yes.
power of network, you know, really, I think it makes a difference. And if a person is an extreme introvert, right, I think the struggle will be very real if they decide to uproot. You must have a little bit of if you're an extreme introvert, you must have a little bit of that energy to go out there and meet people lah. You can't just
Yeah, and you're right in that you do need those introductions. And speaking of connections, right, that's something that I would say, kind of relating back to an earlier question about like, oh, the difficulty of finding work, you know, economy, was it blah blah. At least, like I said, the initial 1 or 2 years it wasn't, and then of course COVID hits, right?
Okay.
But I would say, despite that, so I have gone through the initial years where everything was pretty okay. Politically, I think that was during a different administration, so you know, maybe a little bit tricky. And then COVID, and then after that, out of COVID, there was a hiring boom and all that. Right? Still, it didn't happen to me. And what I've learned, right, a lot of work, especially when you're older,
Yeah.
via referrals. And when I think back about when I was in Singapore, I feel like even back then when in a senior role, right, because the labor pool is so small that I regularly still get called by like recruiters. Even sometimes when I apply like that, it would still work. But of course, okay, times are different.
Yeah.
But just saying, yeah, connections.
So, okay, I'm gonna ask you some personal questions. You tell me whether you want to answer or not, lah.
Okay.
Did you move? Did you leave Singapore because of your partner, or you decide to, or did you all have a long distance before you move? What was the dynamics like?
Yeah, so I moved. I would say the simple answer is yes, I moved because of my partner, but at the same time, also not really. I would say, okay, let me explain what I mean, right? So my partner has been, we knew each other, and then he moved to Singapore and then spent like 10 over years there, right? And then we've always talked about like, oh, him moving back. And then back then it was always kind of like, okay, I'm okay move as well, but it's kind of the reality of how because be able to have like visa, right? And all these very real issues. So then rules changed that made it possible.
Okay.
And that was when we started really talking about it more seriously. But I
Okay.
never really felt, I just always was worried because I knew like, oh, I'm getting older, I'm happy with my work, I'm making good money, this all of these things, right? I knew I wanted to do it, but I knew I want to do it when I can move forward with the decision, right? With nothing holding me back.
Yeah.
So that decision come entirely from me and not I'm doing it for somebody else.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you would, if not, let's say you didn't meet this partner, right?
Yeah.
And you are just on your own and you decide that okay, it's time for a change, you would still leave, right? You would still move.
I've always
Maybe
had
not US, but maybe somewhere else or
yes, yeah. I've always been open to how should I say, like life in a different place. Back then I was always thinking, oh, maybe it'll be like Thailand, maybe it'll be
yeah. Do you think that okay, so the Jimmy from Singapore and the Jimmy in the US now, do you see clearly the similarities and the differences? Maybe through growth, maybe through different because lifestyle is different, or maybe is a different country, right? So your mode of operation will be different. Do you see it very different? Do you see these two sides of you, and how do you come to terms with them?
Definitely been changes. So leaning towards a positive, I feel I've developed an even stronger sense of independence because so when I was in Singapore, I didn't live at home. I did live at home until maybe like in my 20s. So that's kind of like atypical, right? Like in Singapore, unless you're not a Singaporean, otherwise you tend to live with your family.
Yeah.
Frankly speaking, even simple things like how to use a washing machine, how do you set up your PUB account, right? You pay your bills and all this. It's just everything.
Yeah.
Bank accounts. How do you set up bank account? How does things work here? The tax, what's actually deducted from your monthly income, and all of these things. So I would say that's one of the biggest changes. It's empowering. It's scary, but then when you conquer it, right, you feel empowered. Like, oh, I did it, and it could be very small things or things that to some other people may seem very like trivial. Like, oh, okay, you figured out your, the tax and all this. Like, okay, like big deal. But it's like, oh, okay, I figured it out. Like, you just feel like you conquered it, and you just feel more confident.
But I think if you have done it in Singapore and moved up, because I also moved up quite young, right? I think I moved up when I was 19. Like when you do something that is very different from the typical Singaporean way of doing things, right? And if you moved out, if you're able to do that, I feel, and because Singapore is the way it is, if you're able to do that in Singapore, you should be able to survive somewhere else, because you learn how to be resilient, you learn how to think out of the box. You learn that, okay, I'm different. I need to adapt accordingly. And I think for people in Singapore who are very comfortable already, like maybe they didn't move out until they're 35, after when they're married, then they have their own home and all that. I think for them to leave Singapore in midlife to go somewhere else, it can feel, I think emotionally it can feel much more challenging because they have not prepped themselves for the challenges, because it's very comfortable. Everything is like so nicely laid out for people, right? They just have to follow that easy laid out path. And for people who are thinking, at a certain age, like if they've led a comfortable life and maybe in the 50s for whatever reason they have to leave, I think it'll be quite challenging. I think they need to prep themselves mentally, emotionally for the change. Can be a big change.
Yeah.
Quite different. Yeah.
You're right about and it's something that I've thought about many times as well. That Singapore is very much where if you're in the middle, and in my own way, I've always felt Singapore is like maybe like the middle is the top performers, and then you have those that kind of fall under, right?
Yeah.
If you stay in the middle in all kinds of ways, so in the middle you could be like upper middle, you could be whatever, but if you stay within that, right, like kind of like the study, you pass every year, maybe you might fail 1 year or two, but follow along and you did pretty well and all that. Decent job, decent pay. It's actually set up. It's actually very much set up to setting. The system is very much to set individuals up for success if you are in that middle. And then once you're in that system, it's comfortable. And then as you get older, when you think about leaving, right, I think that's when it is scary, because safety net that you're building all this while, it's so nicely built out, your safety net.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to abandon it or like walk away from it. Yeah.
But having said that, because the way you describe it, right, made me think that actually people in that zone will not even think of leaving unless they're forced to. I don't think they will leave because it's so comfortable. Unless they have children, right, and the children say to them, I'm leaving, you want to see your grandkids, then maybe you want to move with me, you want to then that maybe they're forced to leave, right? But other than that, I think on their own they probably will not. It's too comfortable. I know of people who leave with their kids because they want to see their grandkids, right? They want to be with their grandkids, so they will leave because of that. But it's a different challenge lah, and I don't think they will on their own. They probably will not lah. If we are talking about the already on a very comfortable path,
And I think the comfort and all that, right? And to stay within that comfort, I know there'll be like a camp that will say like, oh, that's so maybe there's a certain assessment or judgment, oh, that's so not doing much with your life or something like that, right? I disagree. I actually think that's fine, to like stay within the comfort. Like, I always feel that there's nothing wrong, whichever ecosystem you are within the society, right, or within the world. If you are happy and content within the ecosystem, that's fine. When you start having that thought of like, oh, but I don't know, is there, for example, okay, I think about, let's say, like an older adult couple, like say no kids, and financially quite secure and all this, but then they're thinking, okay, Singapore is getting a lot crowded. Thinking, I want more space, I want like a lesser, like more less stress. And I think when there's dissonance like that is when, then how? Because you have this comfort and then you go, I'm not going to get it here, then it's either you put that aside or you explore that.
I think once you have that itch, right, that thought, then you should explore it. Even if it's not long term, Like, don't go and sell your house and then go and move, just maybe, like you say, you have to live there at least. Let's say someone decide to, okay, maybe I'm going to move to Thailand. I want to move to Thailand. Do it for 3 months, or as long as your visa allows. And I think that can feel maybe more comfortable for people,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yes.
if you have that itch, right, and you don't do it, you will regret, like you say, because you will keep thinking about it. Like, I should have done it. I don't know what it's going to be like. At least you do it, don't like it, okay, like, come back home. It's not so, I mean, you got nothing to lose in that sense. Yeah.
And you know what? That is like the perfect kind of like segue, right? To bring up something that I just thought about that's kind of relevant to like, earlier we talked about like, if somebody else is thinking of doing the same thing, right? What's one of the things to think about? What would working out mean to you? Like, the moving overseas, to have that definition and to at least have an idea. You don't need to have it very, very clear, but have an
Yeah.
idea. And once you have the idea, to also be open that your definition may change, but you must have the idea because, however big it is, because I think otherwise you go and that second guessing, that self-doubt will happen, especially a
Yeah.
lot, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that definition of like, no, it's still working out well, you get rattled.
Yeah.
Because
that is true.
like for example, if I use my situation as an example, right, then it'd be like how, the buffer was like for this period of time to find a job, and then still cannot find. You start to like, oh no, like this and that, right? If you don't have that anchor of like, no, but this is still the right decision, or like, no, this is not the right decision. Like this has meet the requirements of abort, abandon plan, like go back to plan A or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I watched a YouTube video of this Singaporean family, very typical Singaporean family, like they go by the normal route kind of family, right? They bought a house in Japan, and it's the whole YouTube channel is about their journey of buying this house, uprooting, and I thought, wow, and to purchase a house, yeah, that's not a small, not a small purchase, right?
Yeah.
It's like uprooting everything. So the YouTube channel is really on that. Having lived overseas, right, for so long, do you think your identity as a Singaporean has become stronger? The reason I ask is because, okay, my daughter is only 20, but she lives in the UK now, and it's been 3 to 4 years, and now she's like very protective of the Asianness in her. I mean, living in Singapore, she's half English, half Singaporean, right? So she's very protective of the Singaporean side. But before she moved, it's like, she didn't even think about it. Like, it's not even Chinese New Year is like, okay, no big deal or whatever. But now she makes it a point, to celebrate Chinese New Year, invite friends, to her place and all that. And so is that happening to you, or has that happened to you?
Yes. I would say if we talk about like culturally, like Chinese, traditions and all this, right? I've always liked them. It's just like food. Coming back to food again. You may have an amazing, let's say, nasi lemak stall next to your house, right? But you won't eat it every day, right? So moving overseas, you sort of hold on to that. For me personally, it wouldn't be so much identity, but it's kind of like comfort, and also, the identity part comes from holding on to parts that you feel are anchored in your culture, anchored in your personal history. So like I said, the Chinese culture part of it, and then also, like for example, there are certain things that I only learned about why the traditions are as such after I've moved here, because I actually made an effort to read about it, read more
Okay,
about it.
yeah.
Then if it comes about national identity,
Yeah.
I've always been very proud of being Singaporean, but I think moving, you just hold on to it even more. You would like, it's like, 9th of August. Is there any live stream of the National Day Parade? Or like,
Yeah.
you make an effort to, let me read the budget report. Let me read, catch up on the, like follow Channel News Asia, Mothership, or like watch YouTube. Like, make sure once in a while you always search for like, oh, Channel News Asia, what other shows do they have?
Okay.
Sometimes it's just to even hear a voice, see a
Yeah.
familiar face, hear a familiar accent.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now with the internet, right, you have easy access to. I think there's Me Watch, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can watch the local, what, Channel 8 or whatever. And
Yeah.
so you don't miss out in any way. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, I'm very impressed by your daughter to be like living overseas at such a young age on her own. It's really impressive. I recently got to know this new friend who not lives in San Diego, but she lives in, and she also came here when she was 18 to study, and then she continued to work, and she's now in her 20s. And I'm just really utmost respect as a Singaporean, as a woman, just utmost respect, because for me, I really don't know if I would have been able to do that at that age, to have that level of confidence and independence. And it's very different.
Yeah. But I think when you're younger, you're far more adaptable and you are less rooted, I feel it's probably much harder to uproot yourself when you're older because you have so much more at stake, you have so much more to give up. But when you're young, you have practically nothing to give up. Right? You're just, do you know what I mean? You haven't built anything, you haven't built a career. So it's probably easier in that sense. But of course, equally scary, right? Because you are young, you're immature, you don't know what the world is like. So going out there can be quite scary too, But I think it's different, just quite different.
Different set of what's scary, right?
Yeah.
I guess when you're young, you may still feel like, oh, I'm actually still like a child.
Yeah,
I'm not there with my parents. My mother is not here. But at the same time, you have the advantage of time on your side.
Yes.
In that, oh, if I whatever, then okay, then I'll only be 22 or 24 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then as you're older, it's like, oh, okay, you don't have the advantage of time, and then you're like, I'm doing quite well now.
Yeah.
My friends,
I think,
yeah,
can be. Do you see yourself living there for the rest of your life, or do you think that somewhere along the line you and your partner may want to move elsewhere, or any direction, or happy where you are at the moment?
I'm totally open. That's the sort of beauty about it. Like once you've done it, right, you feel like, okay, I can do it again. Like, it's going to be a lot of work, but okay, if we need to do it, I can do it again.
Yeah.
And I also want to mention one little thing, right, that with moving in Singapore, like renting a place and all this, and then now moving overseas, right, I think one of the benefits of renting and moving in Singapore many times is knowing how to edit your belongings, because you're like, okay, this thing, are you sure you want to buy it? Because then if you move, you have to move this.
Yes.
It's very big,
Yes.
So you know how to be very ruthless in your editing.
Yes.
And then when you have to move overseas like that, even more.
Yeah.
Because you cannot like, oh, okay, everything put at your mom's place or whatever, right? Like, not very nice to like take up someone else's space.
Yeah. So do you actually have some stuff still here, like a storage unit or whatever, or everything is with you in the US?
I have some stuff with my mom, but it's like maybe one box. I mean, strictly speaking, more than one box, but those things have always been there. Those things, even though you moved out, you still have your things there.
Yeah. Okay.
But the really, as an adult, like, hey, I'm going to move overseas, I need to put something here, it's like one box.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think my daughter still need to edit some stuff, right? She's got several boxes with me. I think one of the big boxes is all the toys, right? That she's still not. I mean, she's only 20, so a lot of like childhood memories, right? And she's like, I don't know whether to throw away or keep or what. So it's a huge box, and I have to lug it with me when when I move, I have to like carry.
Yeah.
So I've got boxes of her stuff. So I made her edit.
Every time.
So every time she comes, I said, "Can you reduce?"
10%. But distance helps.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm sure it
sure
does.
you've seen it happen.
Yeah.
Like distance helps. Like you hold very dear, then you come back. Not to say that you've had a change of heart. You come back and you realize, you look at it and you go, oh, like really nice memory. I remember this person gave it to me like that, right? But then you realize, all this while you've held on to that memory without the physical thing.
Yeah.
So if really push comes to shove,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. Plus you also build new memories, right? So the new memories also maybe become more meaningful in that sense. Not that we are competing which memory is more important, but
Yeah.
then it's easier to let go some of the physical stuff. Yeah.
Oh man, that's the thing. Attachment. That's something that I've really learned more and more with age. Attachment in all sense. Attachment to things that make you think of something. Like, oh, this was given by somebody, and then maybe you treasure it, but maybe you really haven't really used it or looked at it. You bought it yourself or whatever. But when it comes to the core, and the first time you start editing your core, there's so much, for me, I felt like, there's so much guilt. Like, oh man, this person gave this to me, blah, 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 and all that. But
take a photo.
Now with time, I learn how to learn how to do it.
I will always take a photo. I say, okay, I haven't used this in the past 2 years, right? For example, why am I still carrying it around? Why do I still have it? It was useful at that point in time. Take a photo, give it away, throw it away or whatever. Donate it, whatever. Yeah.
Honor the memory without the physical presence. Right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. This has been quite a different type of episode, but I quite like it. It's more. I think we've had you on so many episodes, but we never really talk about this, right? Like you moving, you
just always like glimpses.
Yeah. So I think it's good to have one where we're talking about you truly not in Singapore with us, and and sharing a bit of your life there. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me share my story, and also to people who are listening, watching, right? I think whatever age you are, just really go for it. Don't be afraid. Don't, like what Sue said that once upon a time I told her, don't let fear hold you back from what you feel you're meant to do. You'll be okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.